Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name's Greg. I am on a language learning journey. I'm here to share that with you, some of the things that I've learned over the past 4 years of learning Italian. Um, Today I want to talk about, are Americans just lazy? Why can't we learn more than one language? Why are English speakers so bad at learning languages? I want to dive into that. I want to talk about four different things that I think that are obstacles that may get in the way of native English speakers and Americans. So before I jump into that, I want to talk about my first experience outside of the United States. My wife and I went to Italy, and we were at a restaurant. We were eating, and the waiter came up, and he was speaking to us in English. And then he was speaking to another couple in another language, and he was going to different tables, and we could hear that he was speaking a couple different languages. So we asked him, how many languages do you speak? And he said that he could get by in 7 languages, and this just blew us away. I mean, 7 languages, that's crazy. And but it was something that was, at the time, I had never heard of somebody who can speak that many languages and that easily. It was amazing, and I thought, wow, it's embarrassing that that we only speak one language. Um, we were also another time we were in Florence, and I saw somebody, an Italian, talking to their dog, obviously in Italian, and I thought, okay, well, that dog even knows more Italian than I do, and that's embarrassing too. So, one other experience, we were in Bruges in Belgium, and the gentleman that was working at the front desk of our hotel was speaking to us in English, and his English was amazing. He was speaking in perfect English. There was no accent. It was incredible. Then he turned to talk to the couple behind us, and he started speaking French. And he just like a light switch, he just started speaking French to them. He then turned and spoke to a colleague of his in Danish. And then later on, I heard him talking to another couple in German. Of course, I asked him later how many languages he spoke and what languages they were, because I wasn't sure what different languages he was speaking at the time. And he said he speaks 5 fluently, and he speaks 2 or 3, um, you know, proficiently. And again, that was the moment that I thought, I have to learn another language. It's a whole new world out there, and it was just amazing to hear somebody who had that ability, who could just turn and talk to one person in one language and have no problem switch to another language and speak fluently. So that was incredible. So anyway, I want to get back to the 4 things that I think, the 4 obstacles that get in the way of most people, most Americans, and why we don't learn languages. So number one, I think we have very limited exposure to other languages. Other than big cities, it is rare to hear people speaking in a different language. For me, when I grew up, I never heard another language. Um, and to hear somebody speaking 2 different languages was just incredible. So I think we have very limited exposure to languages. We certainly don't, like the waiter or the gentleman at the front desk, we certainly don't find ourselves in situations where we have to speak or interact in another language, and maybe in the bigger cities. But for the most part, most of America, you're just not going to be in a situation where you have to speak another language. Spanish, a little bit, depending on where you are, where you live, but for the most part, you're just not going to hear people speaking German or French or some other language. So again, I think it's limited exposure is a big obstacle for us. Number 2 is lack of there's ease of access. So in other words, I know in Europe you can hop a train and 2 hours be in another country, and 2 hours later be in a different country, in a third country. I think this is very beneficial for especially students in Europe when they take a gap year and they go live in another country for a year, and they get to learn the language and learn the culture. I think that's amazing. For us, obviously, if we want to get to another country, For the most part, we have to take a train or take a plane. It's a flight to go somewhere. It's a lot of money. Yes, obviously we border Mexico, but for the most part, most resort towns that you're going to go to in Mexico, they speak English to us. So even when we try to speak Spanish, they usually come back and speak English because our Spanish is not so good. So anyway, number two is just it's not easy to get to another country quickly and expensively to be able to experience that culture. Number three is our school system. And this is where, unfortunately, we fail miserably on this because for the most part, most students aren't learning another language until high school. Their first exposure, for me, my first exposure to another language was in high school, was in ninth or 10th grade. And we had the choice of two different languages. We could either learn Spanish or French. And most people just went and took Spanish, but it wasn't something at that point. Unfortunately, most people are just getting a grade and moving on. And again, that's partly to the fault of the traditional method, the traditional method of learning. When you're just studying grammar and vocabulary words, you study for a test and then you move on. You're not becoming proficient in speaking. Our requirements when I was in high school was 2 years. And again, this is only maybe 2 hours per week, and I didn't learn anything. So I know most other countries, they're learning English and maybe a third language, first grade, second grade, and then they continue that on for 12 years. And again, it's still the traditional method, which I think the natural method is so much better, and I'll talk about more about the natural method in another video, but at least they have a foundation of 12 years of learning English and a third language besides their native language. So this is where most Americans, again, we're not exposed to that till much later in life. And number four, unfortunately, this can be a good thing, a positive or a negative, but most places that we visit, people can also speak English. So this becomes a crutch for native English speakers. So unfortunately, even when we try to learn some of the language, the other person, their English is so much better, and it's just easier for them just to start speaking in English. I have tried in several different countries to at least initiate that conversation in another language, and they'll just come back and start speaking English to you because they're just so much better at it. So again, unfortunately, it goes both ways. It can be a positive, it can be a negative. Obviously, it makes things easier for us native English speakers, but it doesn't force us outside of that comfort zone and doesn't force us to learn another language. I find it so interesting that my Italian tutor was telling me that obviously she speaks Italian, but when she goes to other countries, if she doesn't speak that language, or if it's not close enough to Italian, like Spanish or so, both of them will revert to English and speak English. And I think that's so interesting. I think most native English speakers would find that interesting, that two people would speak a foreign language, that's not their native language, to another person who's also speaking a foreign language and it's not their native language, and that's how they communicate. That's how they get by. But that's what she was telling me. That's what they do for the most part. If they don't speak that language, if they don't speak the language of the country that they're visiting. So anyway, those are the four things that I think are the biggest obstacles that get in our way and why we are not better than what we should be in language learning. But again, that does not mean that you can't get there. Obviously, again, I talk about the natural method, using comprehensible input. I think that is the best way to learn. It's the same way all of us learned as a kid. Set those goals and you're going to get there. Anyway, if you have comments, please let me know. If you've had any experiences in other countries trying to speak another language, I'd love to hear about it. If you haven't already, please subscribe. There'll be more videos about this, about my experience of learning a language, and tips on how you can do so as well.